Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week, and today we do Soilwork's Figure Number 5, one of the quintessential melodic death metal albums of the early 2000s. But before we get there, Chris, how are you, bud?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing great. I am very excited to talk about this album. I have a couple of stories that I want to share, but before we get to it, I understand that there's a band that's it seems like they've reformed that I know that you want to talk about. I know you're very excited.
Yeah, so I just found out this morning that the UK-based band Eden's Curse has reunited after a couple of years ago, saying that they were calling it quits. The band is led by Paul Logue. I do not know who's going to be in this lineup. They haven't announced anything yet, but I guess I'll post a song, one of my favorite songs from them during the week, just so you can understand why I'm excited to hear they're getting back together. But they're definitely a really solid, just melodic hard rock / metal band. Very, very good melodies, really catchy stuff. So really looking forward to them getting back together.
Yeah, in that same vein, I got some news for you. I'm going to just read a lineup of artists that are on an album that's coming out in March, and I think that you're going to be very excited. I think you're familiar with Marius Danielson. He had created a couple of albums called The Legend of Valley Doom, and on each of them, he had a wide array of guest singers and guitarists and whatnot. And it's basically, I guess you'd consider it like a real power metal, almost of an Avantasia type thing where he just brings in all these guys together. And I know that we've discussed off the air their first two albums. Have you seen who's on the new one?
I have. I'm actually friends with Marius on Facebook, and so I've been seeing his posts, and this lineup that he's put together is really pretty amazing. I heard that he tried to get Tobias Sammet. Speaking of Avantasia, he asked Tobias to be on the album, but he said no for whatever reason. But I mean, notwithstanding, the rest of the lineup is pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, I guess it won't be a surprise to you, but for everybody else out there, I'm just going to name a couple of these vocalists just so you have an idea as to the scope of this thing. Ralph Scheepers, Daniel Hyman from Lost Horizon, who has been on his other albums, and he's one of my favorite vocalists. Ripper Owens, Olaf Hayer, Herbie Langens, Melissa Bonney, who we've discussed here a bunch of times, Alessia Garavello, who's I know one of your absolute favorites from Power Quest, Matthias Blad from Falconer, Alessandro Conti, Tommy Johansson, Jonas Heigard from Dragonland, who we're both very big fans of. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I really can't wait for this thing. And it looks like it's coming out on March 19th. So I'm very excited about that.
This is like a who's who of some of my all-time favorite vocalists. And Elisa Martin, formerly of Dark Moor, also is going to be on there as well. And did you mention Alessandro Conti as well? From
I did, and that I guess, and no disrespect to him because I love him just the same, but like it almost gets lost in the shuffle when you just hear the quantity and quality of the musicians that are appearing, and that's just the vocalists. I didn't even get into the musicians that also appear, so that should tell you something.
Yeah, the first two albums were really good. There was a track that they did with it was almost like the power metal dream combo vocalists of Michael Kiske and Daniel Hyman together, which was like insane. So
yeah, we're gonna post that track during the week just because of if you haven't heard it, you're missing out, and if you have heard it, you should hear it again. That's how good it is. So definitely we'll post that and have you guys check that out. Anything else you've been listening to?
Yeah, so lately I haven't been recommending anything because I was so busy catching up on stuff from 2020 that I may have missed, and I wanted to really be prepared for our Best of 2020 podcast. But now that I'm back checking out some new releases, I haven't gotten a chance to listen. The two new albums came out this week. Need and Dragony both came out with new albums. I haven't had a chance to listen to them yet, but those are my first two albums of 2021 that I have to listen to. But I have been keeping my eye out on a lot of singles that have been dropped. It's pretty amazing how many songs have come out in just 2.5 weeks of this year so far. I first want to mention the band Calidia. They have a new song. They're re-recording their original first album, Lies Device, and they re-released 2 tracks so far before the album has been released proper. And this track, The Lost Mariner, I cannot stop listening to that song. What a just fantastic song. I probably only listened to that first album once. Came out in 2014. The new recordings sound really sharp. So I think that's going to be really cool. They're from Italy, by the way. What else? Human Fortress has a greatest hits album coming out, but they're re-recording a lot of their older tracks, and so they have a new single called The Grimoire. That's also really good stuff. Temperance, who I mentioned in my, I think we both had them on our list for 2020. They're releasing an EP. They have an acoustic version of Start Another Round that has been put out as a single. There's a couple of bands that you turned me on to, so I'll wait and see if you mention them. But what else do I have on the list? Voyager's got a new single. They do a cover of This Boy's in Love. Metalite has a new single called A Virtual World, which is a really excellent song. At the Movies, which we discussed last week or 2 weeks ago, I forgot which, they're starting to release covers from 90s movies now. Their first set from last year was from 80s movies. They've already released 2 new songs on YouTube. Bloodbound has a new single called When Fate is Calling. There's a lot going on. Orden Ogan just dropped a new single. I mean, I could go
You almost find that the beginning of the year is when they just get this dump of new music, and I think it's kind of slows down towards the late November, Christmas time and stuff like that. But January it just picks up with a force full of stuff, and I think that this spring is going to have a ton of new albums. Just one that I want to mention, and I had mentioned this to you off air. Somebody had recommended this band for me, and I didn't know what to expect. What I was told was that it was melodic black metal, but with folk elements, and I really just didn't know what to expect. And here comes the hard part, announcing, I guess, what their name is. They're a band called Xanthocroid, okay? And they came out with a pair of albums back in 2017. It's called Of Earth and Axon, Axe 1 and 2, 2 separate discs. And the real, I guess, proof for me was when I sent this to you, and to say that you are not a black metal fan, I think would be an understatement. But even you, I think, enjoyed this, and it's really what I just mentioned. It's folky, melodic black metal, and it's amazing. And I'm just hoping that these guys come up with something new, because, like I said, these albums came out 3 or 4 years ago now, and they're just fantastic.
And where are they from?
The black metal capital of the world, Southern California, which is bananas to me, because it's just not what I was expecting to hear from a band from Southern California, but they do it so well. I'm going to post something by them this week as well, just because it's something that more people need to hear.
I really enjoyed this, and I immediately thought of my friend Caleb when I heard it, because he likes black metal, and he also likes, symphonic music. And I pitched it to him as, did you ever want to hear Rhapsody do a black metal album?
This is it.
So, and he wrote back and he's like, this is the first new band I've really liked in a while. This is really good stuff. So he was impressed. I was impressed too. Definitely not my usual fare, but it's really catchy. It's really well done. The orchestrations are awesome. The vocals are I guess more accessible than you would expect from a black metal band. I recommend this highly. This was really good stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was different enough that I really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, I hope they come out with something new. And unless you have anything else, I think we should get right into figure number 5.
Yeah, I just named 46 bands that will come out with singles this year, so I think we can move along.
I think everyone can start doing their homework. But the reason why I chose this, and obviously when I had selected this, I really didn't know that we were going to be doing a Children of Bodom album, recently. But I'll say this: I always thought that Children of Bodom was really just power metal with those different vocals, if you will, over the top. This is really the first, in my opinion, melodic death metal band that we're covering, and I think it's fitting, at least for me, because it was one of, if not the very first melodic death metal band that I heard. Going back to the early, I guess it was probably 2003, a buddy of mine had sent me a couple of MP3s, because at the time I was just a power guy and a prog guy. I knew nothing of this world. And he sends me a couple of tracks. He sends me, what does he send me? He sends me Hours Past in Exile by Dark Tranquility off their 2002 release Damage Done. He sends me an In Flames track, Only for the Weak, off their 2000 release Clayman. And he sends me Rejection Roll by Soilwork. And I was blown away by just like the musicality of all of these bands. And we could do a long form episode on all of them, I'm sure. But I remember hearing enough that, the vocals were definitely something that I had to get used to, but there was so much melody behind the tracks that I really did start to kind of fall for this stuff. So I went to Tower Records, and the first two albums that I bought were Figure Number 5, which I thought was fitting, and for that reason, obviously, why we're doing it today. But I also bought their 2002 release, Natural Born Chaos, which is the album that immediately precedes this. And I think both of these albums really are actually a departure for Soilwork based on what they had been doing the 5 or 7 years prior. And I'm not even sure how familiar you are with their, the deep recesses of their back catalog, but they were a real, I don't even want to call them melodic. They were kind of a death metal band in the same vein of an At the Gates or any of those mid 90s, Swedish quasi melodic death metal bands. But then they really changed focus with these two albums into a more almost like an alternative / new metal / melodic death metal sound that I had never heard before until, like I said, I had gotten these discs. And I guess that's the reason why I fell in love with it, because it was just kind of different and something that I had never heard, at least back in 2003 when I was still listening to a ton of Halloween and Gamma Ray and stuff, stuff like that. When did you first hear Soilwork?
I believe you suggested the song Rejection Roll probably after you had heard it. And that was my first. So probably like 2003, 2004, 2005, somewhere in that vicinity. That would have been my my intro to the band. I probably wasn't a big fan at the time. I was still a little bit closed-minded towards, the death vocals and kind of that heavier style. But when I believe the last time they came to the US to play at the Prague Power USA Festival, I decided to really kind of take a better listen, and I ended up becoming a really big fan of the band, and I made a point to see them live, and I thought they were fantastic. So I kind of gave myself a little bit of I kind of skimmed from the top. So I was listening to a lot of the songs that they were playing live at the time and trying to just get myself prepared for what I might actually hear at that show. But since then, I have been keeping track of all their new releases, and I would definitely consider myself a fan of the band now.
Yeah, and like I said, they're an interesting band, and we'll do a deep dive into the album in a second. But when you look at like the number of guys that have been in this band over the years, it's kind of no wonder that they've changed their sounds markedly from 1996 when they first started. You're talking about a real progression here. I mean, they've had so many different artists be in the band and tour with the band and then leave the band for various reasons. And maybe that's why they've kind of evolved so much. Again, going from that real death metal sound to here almost like a rap. There's elements of rap, there's elements of new metal for sure, which is kind of timely because you're talking about the early 2000s. And then, onto the later stuff where they really kind of, I guess, have matured. And, we've discussed the new EP where they have a 16-minute track on there. They've really changed their sound over the years, but kind of kept to that, those heavy riffs, the Bjorn Street's vocals, which I think, and we'll get to that in a second, just, one of the true highlights of this band that kind of sets them apart from other melodic death metal bands, at least to me.
Right. And I like that you mentioned that it kind of was following that alternative metal, new metal style, because when I was listening to this album, I thought to myself, like, I could have seen this being played on the radio around this time. Like, I feel like it would have been maybe
it
the
wasn't
vocal.
that far away from like a Linkin Park or a Limp Bizkit, which is, I'll be
Yeah.
honest, I
Yeah.
never listened to that stuff, but
If there
I
was-
can hear the similarities.
If there was a liquid metal like style radio station like XM Sirius has now,
This
which
would have been all over it.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure that they play Soilwork now anyway. But if at the time in 2003, I don't know if this would have made like FM radio, because I didn't see a lot of bands with death vocals on FM radio. But the music itself is very melodic and accessible, I think, to somebody who wouldn't normally listen to death metal.
I completely agree. I think that the most accessible track is probably Rejection Roll, despite the fact that it has the contrasting vocals, as do almost all the tracks on the album. But it just has that really melodic chorus that you find yourself singing to yourself, I think, for at least for me, for years after the fact. And for a long time, it was actually my favorite Soilwork song until I kind of expanded and heard other things. But it hits you right away. And what I think I actually liked about the album is, every song on the album is under 5 minutes. And normally I listen to stuff that's a little more progressive and you hear a lot more time changes and stuff like that. But with this album, and I guess a lot of melodic death metal, I like the fact that it's in, it's out, and it's on to the next track. And it really just kind of, there's no wasted, songs on this. It's just in, out, and on to the next one, but they're all catchy in their own way. And what I think I actually noticed more about this time listening to it was, I guess in the past I had always kind of, a lot of the songs blended into one another, I thought, but there's actually a lot of distinction between all of these tracks. And it's something that I think I appreciate now that I may not have appreciated 15 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. I found the same listening to it. I actually listened to this album 6 times this week.
No kidding.
Yeah, I just really wanted to really get a feel for it and really try to see if it really like just hit me harder than maybe it did when I listened to it years ago. But yeah, I listened to it pretty much every day this week except for yesterday. So
nice. What was the highlight for you? And I don't mean in terms of a track. Just what stood out? Was it the guitar riffs, which I think are shredding? Was it the keyboard samples over it? What exactly was it?
All of it. I think that the total package, copyright Lex Luger, it's all there. Like the guitar work is fantastic. I was reading that this album is the first time that their keyboard player, Sven Karlsson, was attempting at songwriting. So I guess there was more of a keyboard appeal going on in this album, which is definitely noticeable. I love Bjorn's ability to sing both death vocals and clean vocals really well on both ends of the coin. I just thought it all came together for a really strong album, altogether.
And I'm happy you mentioned Sven Karlsson's keyboards. He's actually one of the only two, him and Bjorn the singer are the only two guys that were recording on this album that are still in the band. Because I told you they've gone through just a number of lineup changes over the years. But right now, the only two guys are the vocalist and the keyboard player, which I found kind of interesting because a lot of people think that they're known for their guitar riffs, which is understandable, but they've just had so many guitarists over time that it's a little surprising that there's only two left. I'll say this. If I had to pick a favorite riff on the album, if you listen to Brick Walker, I think that is like one of the quintessential Soilwork tracks and maybe one of their most underrated tracks altogether. That was the one that was really just staying in my head for days on end after I, heard this. I listened to it, I guess, for the first time earlier this week, and I listened to it a bunch too, but that was the song I found myself singing like hours after I listened to it.
It's funny. I found an interesting factoid that is kind of cool that around the time this album was released, Soilwork was touring with Children of Bodom, who we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. After they recorded this album, they went on tour with Children of Bodom and Shadows Fall in Europe through April and May. So there's a little connection there. I thought that was kind of cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad that you chose this. I'm going to tell you my favorite song, my track of the week, was Departure Plan.
Where you choke your last sigh. You got
Nice.
I liked I felt that it was probably one of the most melodic songs on the album. There's a little bit more of the clean vocals, which I really enjoy. It was just a super catchy song. That was my choice. I enjoyed that song quite a bit.
It's funny because it's now, between this and the Children of Bodom, you picking one of those tracks in the middle that's really just a, no pun intended, a departure from the rest of the album. I find that interesting. It's like you're consistent, if nothing else. But no, it's a great track. I totally agree with you. I'm going to just give you mine now just because I was talking about it. I thought Brick Walker was just absolutely phenomenal and different. The riff is just fantastic, and the chorus stuck with me. So I'm gonna go with Brick Walker. But were there any other tracks that you particularly enjoyed?
Yes, I'm also marked Distortion, Sleep, and Downfall 24 as my other two the songs that I enjoyed the most. And I think again, I think it's just the songs that have the catchiest melodies are the ones that really suck me in. So those definitely those would be my top three.
Downfall 24 might have the best chorus on the album. I think that or Strangler have the best chorus on the album, at least to me. And I think it would be remiss not to mention in greater detail Bjorn Street's vocals. I don't think, if you listen to the early Soilwork stuff, I don't think you appreciate how good of a vocalist he is because the production's a little bit raw and he's obviously a very good death metal, singer, but you don't realize how diverse he is until you, at least in my mind, start hearing this album because it's kind of like he does three vocal styles in one. He obviously has, those, I guess like those harmonious vocals where he's like singing these lovely choruses over, awesome riffs and the cool keyboards. I
thought he sounded like Jeff Scott Soto in certain area,
really,
he would sing
that's
like
interesting.
That.
Yeah. And you wouldn't expect the guy who can do these like guttural growls and then these high pitched screams, not Rob Halford high pitched screams, but these screams on top of the growls and then just like the regular vocals. He's so multi-talented that it's no wonder that he's doing it at the movies or a band like that, but or obviously Night Flight Orchestra, which is, his real, I guess what he's spending a lot of his time on now. But it's just amazing that he can do all three of these seamlessly. And I think that that's part of what sets Soilwork apart from other melodic death metal bands. I come across a lot of these bands and the growls are great, but the cleans leave something to be desired, or the cleans are really good, but the growls seem like they're almost forced. But he just does it all seamlessly and he can go from one style to the other without even it's just seamless how he's able to transition, and he does it live too, which is probably the most remarkable thing of all. It's easy to do it in a studio with Pro Tools, but when you can go to all these different styles live and not miss a beat, that's the most impressive thing to me about the whole thing.
Well, I look at it like when you think of a band like Scar Symmetry, after Christian Alvestam left the band, they had to get two vocalists one to do clean vocals and one to do harsh vocals.
That's right.
It's hard enough to sing one type of music very well, and for somebody to be able to do the job of two different people and at the level that Bjorn does it, it just goes to show you he's doing what other bands need two people to do by himself.
100%. And like I said, if you enjoyed, or I should say, if you've never heard Figure Number 5, I think it's well worth the 45 minutes to listen to it. I've always kind of, and maybe it's because I bought them together, but I've always kind of had this as like a companion piece to Natural Born Chaos from the year before, because they are very, very similar sounding. Those two albums are a little bit polarizing. I think that the old fans of the band didn't really like this change to the kind of more alternative sound. But by the same token, I think that anybody would recognize that it was a really, really interesting take on what kind of music was coming out at the time, like we've discussed. And then from there, they've obviously evolved a number of times. Where would you rank this in terms of your overall favorite Soilwork album? Having listened to it as much as you have now.
To be honest with you, I don't know Soilwork's other albums well enough to really answer that question.
Okay.
I really enjoyed their most recent full length release of Verk Light 10. I just butchered that, but I like their new stuff. I think it's really polished. The production's really strong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know like any of their other albums like as well as I know Figure Number 5 now after listening to it so many times and their most recent release. So I can't really answer that question, but I'd be curious to know what your answer would be.
It's funny because for a long time it was this and Natural Born Chaos, but in 2013 they came out with a double album called The Living Infinite, and I was simply blown away by that effort. I thought it was just so good because I thought the songwriting was just a step above anything that they had done previously. So to me, that was always the album that stands out. But I also recognize that this was kind of my first love for Soilwork. So when I went back and listened to it, I forgot how much I love this older sound. So I guess it really depends on what day you're asking me. If you would have asked me a week ago, I would have said The Living Infinite. Now I'm not so sure because I really enjoyed kind of going back and revisiting this stuff.
Yeah, you had mentioned Natural Born Chaos, and I just wanted to mention that when I was getting into Soilwork, getting prepared to see them at Prague Power, the first track, Follow the Hollow, was one of the ones that really stuck out to me. I really enjoyed that track. So I was just looking at the list of songs from that.
That and As We Speak, I think, are two of the standout. I mean, and again, we could always do a deep dive into Natural Born Chaos, but those two songs that kind of start the album out really set the tone for that album, and it just flows seamlessly into Rejection Roll and the rest of this album. It's quality stuff. It's interesting because I was never a big fan of rap or what I'm calling rap like vocals, but I hear some of this stuff on like the Torch, and I say to myself, man, this is really good stuff. And like I said, I guess it's just a testament to Bjorn's ability to transition seamlessly from one style to the next. If you had to rate the album, what are you giving this?
Much like Children of Bodom, again, like it's not my number one choice for genre, but overall, I thought it was a really an excellent album for something outside, my area. So for me, it's another really solid 8.0.
Nice. I happen to agree with you. Definitely encourage you to listen to Natural Born Chaos as well. I think you'll find that entire album is a nice companion, as I said. And then from there, they've evolved, and certain albums I've liked better than others. I think that if you ask different people, you'll get different answers. I know some people that just love the Panic broadcast, the Ride Majestic. I mean, they've really just kind of been all over the map, and the new EP is probably their most experimental piece to date. But this was definitely a nice visit back. And I'll say this: if you've never heard, like kind of the old Soilwork sound, check it out. It's different, and it doesn't really, I guess, display Bjorn's vocal prowess quite as much. But if you've never heard like the Chainheart Machine, it's definitely worth a listen because it's just something you can see the evolution there, not only in terms of the songwriting, but just in terms of the way that whole scene evolved from the mid '90s up into what you hear today.
I would like to do that. It's funny that you mention it because I'm looking through my list of albums here on my iTunes, and I don't think I've ever listened to anything from their first album. So I would be curious I was actually kind of surprised that they went as far back as they do back into 1998. Their first album came out, so they've been around.
Oh yeah, they started in '96, but the album started long before that. And once in a while, you go out on when you see them on tour. I most recently saw them on 70,000 Tons of Metal. They played 2 sets and they broke out Bastard Chain from A Predator's Portrait, which I totally wasn't expecting, and it was nice to see that just because it was something that I had never ever seen live, and that's obviously one of their much older songs and stuff like that. They do mix it up, and at this point their catalog is just so large that they really they kind of have the ability to just play whatever they want at this point. And I think that they have such a big fan base that it doesn't really matter what they play. You're going to get something or a number of tracks that you just love because it's, they have such a deep discography at this point.
I do have two little anecdotes about seeing Soilwork live that whenever I hear Soilwork or think of Soilwork, I think of these two things. One, my friend Amy, who listens to our show every week, so shout out to Amy. She, this is definitely not her style of music, but she was in the venue when they played at Prague Power, and the only thing that she took out of the show was that Bjorn kept spitting on the stage, and she was so disgusted by that she every time she sees Soilwork or hears Soilwork, she's like, "Oh, like I just spit all over the stage." And the other story I recall was our friend Pat during this set just walking right up to the stage and putting his arms up and just like making himself at home. And just like he owned the place, that's just how Pat is, if you know him. And I just remember Glenn Harveston, the promoter, just coming up to him and screaming at him in the middle of the set, like you're not a sponsor for this band, get the hell out of here. And all I could see,
making himself at home as usual.
Yeah, all I could see was just Glenn screaming, but I couldn't hear a word of what Glenn was saying because the band was playing, so it was just Soilwork guitar riffs and me watching Glenn Harveston scream, and then Pat just with the smug look of satisfaction that he always seems to have on his face. So those are my two takeaways.
After I'm not even sure he knew what was being said to him, but the expression, I guess, was worth 1,000 words. So it didn't really matter what was being said. It was pretty obvious as to what the implication was, which was get the F out of here.
Yeah, I just remember he looked at me after Glenn walked away and he just shrugged and went about his day.
Yeah, I remember that as well. It was good times. I can't believe how many years ago that was now. And I guess with that puts a bow on figure number 5, which is definitely a nice trip down memory lane. It was released on April 22nd, 2003. So it'll be celebrating its 18th anniversary very, very soon. And normally it would be your time and your selection for next week, but somebody had come with a request, and I think it's not only timely because this particular album is going to be celebrating its 20th anniversary in March, but it's also I think it's going to lead to a pretty interesting discussion. Milton, friend of the show, had asked us to do 0 Hours, The Towers of Avarice, which is a progressive metal band from the United States. I think that many people would argue that this is their best album, although I think that it's an interesting album because it came out 20 years ago, but it was really, really different for the time. And it's an album that I think if it came out now, it may have even been more well received because it was kind of ahead of its time. But in order to go back in time and really do a deep dive, I actually went back and listened to it earlier this week, and I look forward to listening to it again next week. I think that we should skip you for a week. I'm sorry about that, but I think we should take the fan request and do the Towers of Avarice next week, if that sounds good to you.
Well, I think this is that point in our partnership where we have to part ways. I wasn't conferred on this. You're just dropping this bomb on me out of nowhere. So this will be our final episode. No, I'm just kidding. It was actually a mutual conversation that we had with Milton earlier in the week. And this is kind of cool because I don't know this album at all. And the only thing I really know about 0 Hour is they were one of the opening bands my first time attending Prague Power in 2002. And I don't even think I saw them play. If I did, I don't remember it. It was a long time ago, and I've had a lot of beer since then. So, but yeah, I do I always remember them as just being like one of the two bands that were playing on that lineup that I had never heard of, along with Reading Zero. So, I mean, even to this day, I just never really stopped and gave him a shot. But I definitely noticed over the years seeing people wearing like 0 Hour shirts and stuff like that at Prague Power. And I'm like, well, I guess this band isn't just a bunch of, Prague Power 3 jobbers. Maybe they're worth listening to. So
yeah, they have like a bit of an underground following, and I've actually seen people wearing their shirts at like Dream Theater shows and stuff like that. And I guess it's not terribly surprising given the style of music that they play. But I think it's going to lead to an interesting conversation, because kind of how certain songs, like certain Soilwork stuff, may not be in your wheelhouse. This may go in the other direction, where it's just so progressive that you may not love it, but at the same time, I think you'll appreciate it. Maybe I'll be wrong, but that's just my guess. But we'll do that next week. We'll give everyone a taste of early 2000 progressive metal in the Towers of Avarice.
Yeah, and it'll give me an extra week to decide what I want to choose for the following episode, because I really hadn't come up with like something that really just struck me as something we need to do next. So it'll be good to have a little extra time.
Sounds good. And if anybody else has any requests, hit us up. We'd be happy to take those requests. We'd appreciate any likes or follows on any of our social media platforms, or a 5-star review if you think we deserve it. That stuff helps other people find the show, and that is really, really important to us. And we appreciate the support.
Same. I couldn't have said it better myself. Just thanks to everybody, and we hope you're enjoying what we've been doing.
Very good. And then until next week, when we do the Towers of Avarice, have a good one, Chris.
All right, take care, buddy.
Down falls